around tables like that, sit down and do something. And I just stood back and listened to them begin to reflect on what they were doing. Say, I really like doing this, and this is something I could do with my kids, and my kids would enjoy it. And so we're often, most of it, just creating that sort of model. But most of us, even teachers, I think we're just inviting them to think about it and take it in positive ways based on what they learned. And again, if you focus on the experience of it, you've all had that experience. And you can trust that. It isn't like whether you know physics or not. And if those questions come up, there are resources for all of us to go look, whether it's personal in the sense of community or informational in terms of the web. But I think the hardest part is sort of creating that supportive context that generates these kinds of experiences.
Now, when I was introduced to digital fabrication, I'd never worked with a laser cutter or a 3D printer. I don't have a computer science or an engineering background. My background is really social sciences. My fascination has been around digital media, but that to me, before the field I'm in now, meant cameras and web. So to be able to actualize things into physical form from digital information, it blew my mind in a way that made me feel that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the inspiration that I felt personally around the ability to do that made it so clear to me that this was the way. This was the way. And then when I saw students come in and have this transformation, the lights would go on, in a way where oftentimes we'd work for months to try and, beg, plead, whatever, convince the student, if you just get through this process, we swear, something amazing will happen at the end. And that was happening in the course of an afternoon. And it was because, you could get your hands on it and you could have a result and you could feel the change very quickly and you could kind of see the awe-inspiring amazement that came as a result of that. And so it was really my desire, much like the student doesn't learn computer science because they really want to sit and write code. They learn it because they want to program their robot to do the thing they want it to do, or they want to write their app to do the thing they want it to do. That was the same motivation for me. I wanted to see this effect take place, and therefore I basically learned everything that I could along the way.
Do we have any questions from the audience? Great. If you'd like to step up to the mic here.
Hi, my name is Michelle Lewis. I'm a homeschool teacher and parent, and this is more of just a share than a question. I have a maker, and I didn't realize he was a maker until I walked into this room. But I have a maker, and the way I've supported him, and this everybody can do for your students or for your district, is he always said to me, I want it to be real. So when I hear you all talking about some reflection, some way, and I'm probably going to choke, I apologize. But I remember a day when I was sitting in my living room with my husband and my father. My father's an aeronautical engineer, and I said, he wants to be real. He doesn't want to just do projects and then put them on his shelf in his room. How can I help him? And fortunately, we found the North Carolina Science and Engineering Fair, and the engineering component of these science fairs is becoming stronger and stronger. In fact, Intel ICEF just came up with separate judging rules for engineering projects, which is a major step toward validating the maker movement. And so I would consider science fairs. Also, and I put this out there recently, I've got a WordPress site called stemcompetitions.wordpress.com. If you go down to the very bottom, there's a link to a Johns Hopkins website that lists competitions all over the country. So your children's students can show what they've done. There's an invention competition in Connecticut, and it's produced this kid who's made 3 incredible inventions in the medical field. Without the invention convention, he couldn't have made it real. There's a rubber band competition. Your student just has to take a rubber band and make it into an invention. And that deadline's coming up, it's not gone. And the reason why my son is here is because there's an invention competition called EPAL's Invent It Challenge. And he made an invention, and he won, and he's getting a patent application that's being paid for by EPAL's and the Smithsonian. And it's open to kids 5 to 18 all over the world. And they had an ePals Choice Award where people could vote, and a 9-year-old from Mississippi won that with a purse with a solar panel on the outside and an LED light on the inside. She's a maker, and she's getting a patent. So I guess of everything, what I can tell you as somebody with a maker who feels very passionate, help them make it real. It is so exciting.
That's great.
Do we have any other questions from the audience that you want to ask? Anyone?
There you go. Actually, this is more from Mr. Dougherty. Obviously, Maker Movement is a lot about self-identity and getting into an area you may not have had access to before, hardware, software, all that kind of stuff. But with the advent of, additive manufacturing and, laser cutters and things like that, we hear a lot about how disruptive that's going to be. It's going to completely change manufacturing. It's going to change how you have things in your home. What do you think the actual reality of all that's going to be?
Well, I don't know. I think part of it, I look at like what's the reality today, and just walk around and look at some of the things that people are making. And last night I spoke to makers, a group here that's Austin Hardware Startup Meetup, and it's like 70 people. And I asked, how many of you are starting businesses and doing products, and a good third to half of them are doing that. So these are tools for production, and they for creating value. And almost to follow on that previous question, value is real. When you do something, whether in a lot of different ways, making can be a valuable skill to barter, right? To find something to repair or do in your own community. It can be that you have the opportunity to make a product or provide a service to someone. Sometimes your knowledge, say, of 3D design might be useful to someone else who's creating a product. So I think when you get out in that community and start mixing things together, right now, I tell you, employers like GE and stuff would love to have more kids playing with 3D printers. Why? Because they think 3D printing is going to be part of how they're making jet engines in the future. So, creating a generation that knows how to think that way. And it isn't just, I can press a button and get an object out there. It's actually the design part that I think is, if I have a 3D printer, it could work this way, or it could work that way. This is better, right? This is an interesting path, and I'm going to explore that. So, right now, I think you can already see a lot of that. So I think of the maker movement as kind of having two legs, and one is education, the other is innovation. And they're really the same thing. How do you learn to be able to do new things? And I think what's exciting to me always about technology, in some ways, is you don't need a credential to do something here. Whether it's building a website or doing things that technically other people would find challenging, you bury your head into a book or a website, and you start doing it and trying it, and people see you're able to do it, and you get help from other people. Well, that applies to hardware as well as software today, and I think we're going to see a lot of innovation. Partially in the same way that open source was created innovations. There are small niches out there for products that we can't afford to manufacture them by conventional means. And again, I have people come in and say, my diabetes device, I forgot what they call them, is just, I don't like it. I want something that's different. And I know what it would be. Actually, in Boston, a young boy with cerebral palsy designed, I didn't meet him, but through someone else, he was designing a brace for his hand to hold it in place. The one that he had was uncomfortable and didn't give him any ability to move it. So he's designing that, and he wants to know, can he find some help making that? Now again, in the previous way we'd think about is that, well, how many people have that problem? Well, in our world, we only need one, and we have devices that we can use to make that one thing. So that's pretty amazing opportunity for lots of people.
Yeah, I think along the lines of that too, it's 3D printing and a lot of the new technology that's come out is democratizing the experience. When I was a kid, when I was in college, 3D printers were tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and only very specialized firms had access. So now, because more people have access, we can do those one-offs, we can do a lot more.
And just a quick thought on it. To some degree, where the maker movement is today is makers are serving themselves like they are as hobbyists. And I think the real growth will become when we begin to have like that young boy who designed his device. Maybe that's all he needed to do. Like, he doesn't need to be the builder of that device, but he's really clear on what he needed. We had a competition that we gave an award out this week in digital fabrication to. The idea was, can you 3D printers use filament, which is plastic that's on a spool, and you buy it, it's kind of expensive. So we wondered, can a maker create a device to build a filament extruder to take resin pellets and generate that thin, looks like weed lacquer type filament. And so we put that out last year at Maker Faire, and we announced the winner this week, and it was an 83-year-old man from the Seattle area who's a retiree who likes to create things. So he created an open source machine to build filament. So innovation comes from lots of different places, and I think we'll continue to see that.
Going back to the classroom for a second, how much do you think hands-on learning can supplement or replace STEM classes?
What are the STEM classes exactly? So I think that's the challenge. Is we use these words like STEM, and we don't know really what people, we're improving our STEM curriculum. What do you mean, and what are you doing to do that? And so they're all kind of different approaches. To me, it's sort of, I think STEM is still in this information space, whereas hands-on learning is more the experiential side of this. And so I think they're somewhat very different approaches. I'd like to see them brought together more. I've used this example of, kids aren't asking for more STEM. It's a nice word in the, say we want kids to have more STEM, but they're not asking for it. I think, there is a demand for kids to make things, to do real things, and if we can kind of use that as a gateway in, we can connect them into these subjects, for a variety of reasons. But I think if we continue to teach it in the traditional manner, we'll have diminishing returns.
To Dale's point, STEM is a means to an end. It's not the end in and of itself. The end is the final product. The end is the realization of being able to do something different. And I think that's how the two can come together. Using the STEM to optimize what you've made or to maximize it in some way, I think is very useful. I mean, you don't usually, some people learn math for its own sake, but math is usually used in buildings like this to optimize the structure so that you can, make it as thin and small and light as possible, given your budget and all these other things. So I think STEM is a way to optimize things that students make.
Yeah, I think we've really focused on this last few years. We've really thought a lot about how can we both meet these outcomes and meet these, these needs of these students and the needs of the schools to show and prove that the students have achieved a certain learning, and at the same time not lose the magic of the maker environment. And it has been a challenge, but I do have to say that I believe it's possible. And what we basically do is we crafted a lot of things over the years in the informal environment. So we came up with projects that were hands-on, that we learned did engage students and kept them busy and kept them interested and excited. And then we looked at that and we reviewed it and we adapted, really not adapted it so much as pushed it through a system by which we said, okay, well, they are working with Ohm's law, therefore we can talk of, we can show the mathematical learning outcomes of that. Okay, they're doing these engineering principles and they're learning about physics in this way. And really what we realized, instead of kind of killing ourselves to try and craft the perfect thing that encompassed all of the learning outcomes, we realized they were already in there. We just needed to kind of extract that and take the verbiage and, construct the verbiage in a way where other people could see it, because we saw it. We knew that what they were learning in the process. So I think if we look at a lot of the things that are already getting students excited and getting their, with getting their hands onto things, there's already a lot of outcomes in that we can just pull out.
And how are you and other?
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Perry. I'm from Pittsburgh, and I couldn't help thinking when you mentioned two pillars of the maker movement, that a stool, my mind goes pretty concrete, and a stool with two legs is going to fall over. And I just wanted to give a shout out and a thank you for the third leg as I see it, which is sharing. Whether it's in the storefront space in my community, whether it's in a hacker space, whether it's in a meetup, whether it's in a great gathering like this with these inspiring talks, or the fact that our students can publish things to the web, and that sharing as a form of making, you make and you share, and that sharing provides an occasion for the reflection and for the growth. And so I'd love for you to, if you want to share with us, what have been some of the most effective ways of promoting the sharing after making, because there's always that, it's not good enough, it's not ready, it's that, so how do you encourage people to become part of that sharing exchange, because they'll find it incredibly rewarding once they step in. Thanks.
I think I can begin to address that in that the process, to Dale's point, is such a critical thing. So when they finish, if it's perfect and everything works, that's great. But if it's not, the celebration of the process is critical. And so in the sharing, you definitely don't want to have a student finish something or get close to the end and it not work perfectly, and then feel dejected because it didn't do everything they thought it would do. So if the celebration is around and the sharing is around the process, then I think that you really highlight what's important, and you sort of somewhat insulate yourself from the damaging effect of saying, well, it didn't work, it's not good enough, I'm not good enough, and that kind of thing. And the other thing is, from a structural standpoint, I think sharing can happen in a digital portfolio where they document their work. It can happen in certainly assessments that happen throughout the time. And I think every project or student project should have some sort of public exhibition where people who weren't involved in the process can come and hear from the student and give feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I think all those kinds of sharing are we like to see that. I have to say, from my level, Maker Faire is designed for that kind of public sharing and celebration of that. I think it's a hugely important thing to be able to get outside of, in a sense, a school environment, talk to other people about it, be with adults who do that. One of the interesting things that made me, kids reading Make Magazine is a surprise to me. I didn't design it that way. They just sort of started reading it. And sometimes parents will ask me, why don't you do a magazine for kids? And I go, well, they don't want a kids magazine. They want to be part of, this whole world altogether and not be separated out. So I think there's lots, the magazine itself is designed for that, of sharing projects and sharing what you learn to do. I felt like technology was missing that. We waved our hands about amazing new technology, but we never told anybody how it worked. And I want people to think about, well, yeah, okay, I understand that. So if I want to do my own thing, I can borrow from what other people are doing. I think the other lesson, in particular in education here, is there's no way any of us could organize the educational landscape and all the different things. And the only peace of mind that I can get is just linking people together online. And primarily, one of the roles in sort of Maker Education Initiative is to connect people who are doing things, and they really do want to be connected. But it's much more of a distributed than a centralized network of this isn't a center for making kind of thing. But if you're making, in some ways, connect to us so that other people can find you. And I think it goes back to that community of practice idea. We need sharing at this level too of what did you do? And it's often at a very practical rather than a theoretical level. Like, how did you stock your textiles area? How many sewing machines or soldering irons do you have? And when you do this, a lot of the projects that are online through Instructables and Make are single user projects, not group projects. And that's where I think we're working on some teacher guides that starts thinking about, if you're facilitating a group of 30 kids, here's how to think about that: organizing materials, organizing the activities, and keeping track of that. So it's a different way of thinking about it. But I think we can all benefit from sharing at all levels, whether it's just at the project level or the student level, but even at the teacher level. And one of the surveys we did with teachers, and kind of asked them, for creating a makerspace, what's the most important thing to you? And we gave them things like safety, connection to STEM standards, etc. The number one predominant response was connecting to other teachers who are doing this. So I think that sort of speaks a lot.
I completely agree with all of everything that you guys just said. You're so agreeable.
I know.
We were joking that we should arm wrestle or something up here to keep it exciting, because we all seem to agree. But I think in the classroom, something that we see work is to have design teams and have the kids actually need to share with one another along the way, kind of informally, not in the big presentation sense, which I do think is important at a certain point. But for example, if one student group is working on the wheel construction and another student group is working on the body construction, and those two groups need to discuss their plans so that one fits with the other and works with the other, they inherently have to work together, and they inherently have to share what they're working on and help one another along, and it's in their best interest for the other group to do well as well. So just kind of in an informal setting, that's something that seems to help.
Communication and sharing. I think that's a good place to end on. I want to thank Katie, Carl, and Dale for their time. Let's give them a round of applause. And please stick around, because my colleague Leonard Medlock will be talking to Carl about what Khan Academy is doing, and that's going to happen right now.